I woke up with my face in the dirt and no idea who I was. That's the part nobody believes when I tell it later. Not the pack, not the blood, not the men who came after. The not knowing. I lay there in the wreckage of something that used to fly, ribs aching, tasting copper, and I could not have told you my own name if a knife had been at my throat. Which within the hour one was. The ship had come apart around a stand of black bark trees, and I came apart a little with it. Half my memory was gone, sheared off clean, like a hull plate. What was left was instinct. Get up. Find water. Don't make noise. I found a strip of cloth and bound a cut on my arm, without once asking myself how I knew to do it that way. Tight at the pressure point, not the wound. I called myself Rhea, because the words surfaced when I needed to call myself something, and it felt like it fit, the way a coat fits even when you don't remember buying it. The forest was wrong in a way I felt before I understood it. No birds, no small things rustling. Just the big quiet that means something bigger is listening. I've been walking maybe an hour when I heard the men, 3 of them, moving in that loose, unhurried way that told me they weren't worried about being caught because they were the ones who did the catching. Scavengers. They had the smell of a crew that had done this before, stripping crash sites for parts and whatever else crawled out alive. I went still behind a fallen trunk and watched them pick through the wreck I'd crawled out of an hour earlier. One of them held up a strip of the cloth I'd used on my arm and laughed, low, and said something to the others I didn't need translated to understand. They'd find the blood trail. They'd find me. I had no weapon, no name I trusted, and a body that ached like it had survived something it shouldn't have. I ran. Not far. Whatever instinct had taught me to dress a wound hadn't taught me this terrain, and I went down hard in a gully, and that's where the first one found me. The lean one, Kale, with the half-smile and the stun rod, he didn't bother charging because he didn't think he'd need to. There she is, he said, like I was something he'd misplaced. I didn't have a plan. I had a rock and a body that knew, somehow, where to put my weight. I put the rock into the side of his knee instead of his head because some buried, older part of me understood that a man who can't stand can't chase. He went down screaming, and that's when I heard the growl. It came from above the gully rim, low, layered, more than one throat. I looked up into amber eyes set in a face built for tearing, a beast the size of a transport sled, plated hide the color of wet slate, standing dead still with its head lowered. Behind it, lower to the ground, 2 leaner shapes moved like spilled oil, black-furred, ribs showing through muscle, eyes the dull red of coals banked low. Dusk runners. I knew the name the way I'd known how to bind a wound, from somewhere I couldn't reach. Kale's friends arrived at the gully's edge and froze. I should have died in the next 4 seconds. Every instinct that had kept me alive that morning told me so. Instead, the big one, the gray mark my mind supplied, unbidden, took one slow step down into the gully, and I understood with total, bone-deep certainty that it was not stalking me. It was approaching the way you approach something you've already decided about. It put its head down level with my chest and breathed in, long and deliberate, the way you check a wound to see how deep it went. Easy, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Just 2 syllables, nothing brave in them. Just the only thing I had to offer a thing that size. Easy. I'm not. I don't know what I am right now. Easy. The gray mark made a sound low in its chest that wasn't a growl. It was closer to a verdict. Then it sat. 800 pounds of armored predator folded down onto the gully floor beside me like a dog deciding the porch was good enough for the night. And one of the dusk runners came and pressed its bony skull against my bound arm. Hard enough to hurt. Gentle enough that I understood it as the only kind of tenderness it had. Kale's 2 friends on the rim had their weapons up now. The kind of up that means a man's hands are shaking too badly to aim. What is she? One of them said, not to me. To the beast. The gray mark lifted its head from beside me and looked at them the way you look at something you've already finished thinking about. I didn't know yet what made the pack stop where its instincts should have ended me. I only learned later, piece by piece, the way you learn a stranger's face, that whatever had been stripped out of my memory in the crash hadn't touched whatever the gray mark was reading in my blood when it breathed me in. Something older than the part of me that forgot my own name. Something it recognized as kin, not prey. I never got the full shape of it. I only got to keep it. What I understood in that gully, with a war beast leaning its weight into my side like an old debt being repaid, was simpler. I had walked into this forest as something to be hunted, and I was leaving it as something the hunted didn't dare touch. Cain wants her alive, the second man said, too loud, the kind of loud men used to convince themselves. Don't shoot the... He didn't finish. The dusk runner in my arm moved before I saw it move, and the man's weapon was in two pieces in the leaf litter, and he was on his back with a foreleg pressed flat across his throat, not crushing, just informing him of how easily it could. Down, I said, quiet, the same register I'd have used to settle a startled animal, except I wasn't settling it. I was asking it not to finish something I hadn't told it to start. The dusk runner's weight eased back a fraction. Not off him, just enough that he could breathe and understand the difference. Cale was still on the ground holding his ruined knee, and when his eyes found mine, whatever calculation he'd walked in with. Easy mark, lone survivor, no memory, no fight in her, visibly failed behind his face. I watched him understand in real time that he had misjudged the entire shape of what was in this gully, and that the misjudging was going to cost him the only currency men like him had left to spend, the look on his face when he ran. We're done, he said, scrambling back, dragging his bad leg, not looking at the gray mark at all now, only at me. We're done, we're gone. Just call them off. I could have let the pack finish what their instincts wanted. I understood, with the same wordless certainty that had told me how to bind a wound, that they would have, gladly, and called it nothing more than housekeeping. I didn't, because something in me, maybe the part that remembered nothing else, still wanted to be the kind of thing that didn't need to. Go, I told him. Don't come back to this tree line. They went, stumbling, then running, then gone, and the forest's big, listening quiet settled back and around us, and it didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt like a room I'd been let into. The gray mark turned its head and looked at me with those banked coal eyes, and lowered its skull until its brow rested against my collarbone, heavy and warm and final, the way you'd lean on someone you intended to keep leaning on. The two dusk runners folded down on either side of me in the leaf litter, and for the first time since I'd woken up with my face in the dirt and no name in my mouth, I wasn't alone in the dark with something unknown circling. I still don't have my whole memory back. I may never get all of it. But I learned, in a gully an hour's walk from a downed ship, that some things don't need your history to know exactly what you are. They just need to put their head against your chest and breathe. I named the Gray Mark Tour because it felt like a mountain deciding to stay. I never had to call the dusk runners anything. They came when I exhaled. We walked out of that forest together. Me first, three predators that should have killed me trailing behind in a loose, unhurried line, the way a small army moves when it already knows where it's going. I didn't look back to see if the scavengers were watching from the tree line. I didn't need to. I could feel behind me exactly how far they decided never to come again.